Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football and the NFL Combine. We've got a Combine preview show for you today, and we are going to talk about all the players, all the things, position groups, all of it, and a couple comments by John Schneider and his presser to talk about what that might mean for the roster. Welcome in, Keith. How you doing?
I'm doing good. A lot to talk about today. A lot of players and a lot of stuff we don't know yet, but stuff that we will know here very shortly. As far as that, but let's start with the John Schneider stuff, just because I think that's a good place to start. He had some interesting comments at the Combine. I think the biggest one is saying that Geno Smith is the Seahawks starter until he's not.
Yeah. What a comment. What an endorsement.
That is not a, that is not.
Well, when you combine that with the comments that Mike McDonald made on his interview with Channel 12 News up in Seattle, there's not a lot of confidence there that, it's more of we have to figure it out. We don't completely have it figured out yet, and we're still evaluating the process, and we're also talking to teams potentially looking to trade for a veteran quarterback, and we may draft a guy in the draft. So Geno is what he is until he's not. That's just kind of an interesting way to go about solidifying and putting confidence into the most position group on your team heading into free agency and the draft.
Well, I think it shows you that they don't have confidence in him. I mean, you can try and fake the confidence in him because, it's good for optics, or you can be like, you know what, if he's the best guy we've got, we can win with him, but that doesn't mean we're not looking to upgrade. And I think that's what that was. They're looking at the most important position and saying, he's not good enough. We need to fix that. And they're trying. Quarterback they're looking at.
You can look at it as being kind of, that's kind of crappy to do to Geno, or you can look at it like, hey man, these guys are serious about potentially upgrading us over Geno. Now, Geno, by all accounts, is somewhere in the neighborhood of a top 10 to top 15 quarterback in the league. And you can win with him, but he has certain limitations. There is a cap there as far as how far he can take you. And we all like Geno. He seems to be a very good guy. He's a good teammate, a good player for the Seahawks. But when you have an opportunity to upgrade, and that's John Schneider's primary job, is to make sure the roster is top end, top notch, and at your most important position, that would be a number one job. So he's got an opportunity to look at all his possibilities in free agency, including trades potentially, and then the NFL draft. We draft at number 16. You could theoretically put enough draft capital together with future draft picks and maybe a player and current draft capital to move around a little bit in the draft. You're not going to get up to number 1, 2, or 3, but you could potentially get up to 5, 6, 7 if you needed somebody like Jaden Daniels, if that was your guy. For example, I think that you maybe could reach that point in the draft, but you'd exert huge amounts of draft capital to do so. We're talking probably 2 firsts and a third, over the course of the next 2 years to be able to do that. But there are other prospects in the draft as well.
Yeah, and we'll get to the prospects here in a minute. The other possibility is, okay, you want to maybe move up only a couple spots and get the guy out of Michigan, or maybe you move down in the draft to get more stuff and look at a guy like Bo Nix or Michael Penix. That's another option, but all of that will play out. We'll get a chance to examine that in more detail as we come up, but it was just interesting that they were very non-committal on Geno. And typically, guys will say what they have to say to keep people happy, and they didn't. So I found that interesting. He was also extremely non-committal on Jamal Adams. Um, they're just saying, yeah, we'll have to figure it out. If you don't know about a guy that's making 26 million of your cap, then you're telling people that he's not going to be here.
I think the only question at this point, Keith, would be if they're going to use cut him outright and take the full cap hit in 2024, or spread that out over 2 years and do a post June 1st designation, so they have a better cap number going into 2024. That seems to be the only question to me, unless Jamal Adams were to come to the team and said, listen, I know I'm not worth that. I'm willing to renegotiate my contract. And not only that, but I'm going to get down to the, $5, $6, $7 million range. They may consider a player like that at a number like that. But until that happens, which is totally unlikely, he's going to be a free agent and available to any other team, I think.
And so when players actually take a pay cut, it happens. It doesn't happen as much as it did, 6 or 7 years ago, but it still happens. What you look at with that is they've got to know that they will not get close to what they're making on the open market, because there just isn't a market. And so it's like, we can cut you and you can make nothing, or you can take this pay cut and, still make something. And that may be what they do, is they just renegotiate.
It would be easier
contract.
if he didn't have any guarantees on his contract. He does have some guarantees there. So he won't go without money in 2024, Keith. He's going to make money from the Seahawks.
Oh, I know.
Or
someone else, but no one else will take that contract.
Right.
There is that, but if you can lower his salary and all compensation down to the money he's guaranteed in 2024, so you're going to take that hit either anyway, no matter what, and that's his only compensation. If he was willing to take that,
the only way that he'd be willing to take that, Keith, to me, is if he was absolutely, positively, 100% only wishing to play in Seattle. If he was thinking that he could play somewhere else, they would cut him, he would get paid, then he could go to work for another club at a little over the veteran minimum.
Yeah, it's true, because he could get what Seattle's going to give him and what the other team's going to give him. He can double up that way.
So anyway, I think that we can assume, at least for now, that Geno Smith's off the roster, and we have some of that money to work with in free agency. We just don't know exactly how much yet.
The other thing with that is this is really into the weeds as far as contract stuff, but oftentimes these guys have offsets in their contract where if he does get cut and he goes on and makes another roster, that the money he's making from that team, Seahawks don't have to pay him. Like it offsets what they owe. And I don't know if that's a case here or not. I don't know. Like, those are things that we don't know about until they happen. But it is a weird thing. Like, we'll have to see what his offset language looks like when the time comes.
The other little piece there would be, how much money does the team have for free agency with a post June 1st designation? And I don't know what the timing is on that. Combine. So here we are. it snuck up on us.
The Seahawks coaches are not there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's not.
To me, it's interesting.
There's a bunch of teams that don't have their coaches there, and not just first year staffs that are trying to still figure out what their playbooks are going to look like, because they brought people in from all systems all over the country. Mike McCarthy's not there, and there's a bunch of coaches that don't go, because with the way the stuff is, the only reason the coaches come in are for the interviews. They have no other thing to do. They have no.
That is very true.
They're not part of the drills. They are not part of the medicals. They are there to interview things. Well, you know what? you can have your
You can
general
videotape
manager sitting there, and you
yeah,
can
you can
tape the
videotape
interview,
those too.
or you
Yeah.
can zoom someone in and let them participate in an interview, even though they're sitting back in Seattle. And so, yeah, to me, it's not a thing. I it doesn't bother me at all. In
And
fact,
we've
if
got
anything, it
good
might.
scouting.
Yeah, I would say, if anything, it makes me feel better. I wish that Pete Carroll had not gone a couple of years, because maybe they wouldn't have made the Jermaine Ifedi mistake.
He does get excited about certain things.
Yes, he does.
Yeah. So Seattle has a first round selection, number 16 overall. There's a number of different ways you can go. If you take a look at the different mocks and big boards out there of the kind of players that would be available to Seattle, let's just say between 12 and 20, which is kind of the range with which I think they'd operate. There's a number of different things that they could do out there. It's a very good tackle class. We've been doing a series on prospects up until just this morning. I released a new show covering the interior offensive linemen. Right after we get through the combine, we're going to head over to the offensive tackle class, Keith, and then we're going to turn our attention to the defensive side of the ball and go through all those prospects. But there's a number of tackles in this draft class. If Seattle was in the market for that, or a tackle conversion guy that's going to move inside a little bit. A lot of defensive linemen in this class. There's a bunch of wide receivers, probably the second deepest position class, I think, in the draft is the wide receiver class. If Seattle wants a defensive lineman, this is a great spot to be picking at 16. I think they're going to have a number of different options there. Jared Verse, a guy by the name of Byron Murphy from Texas, is a great option for them at 6'2" or 6'3", 309 pounds as a defensive tackle. Seattle, I think, is going to definitely be interested in a guy like that. Jackson Powers Johnson, the offensive lineman, that is going to play center, one of the most intriguing and dominant interior offensive linemen that we just talked about. That would be a great selection for them. So we can start talking about quarterbacks, because I think, if we go through position groups, that's certainly a place to start. And as far as the on-field workouts, that's what everybody wants to look at. I will say this: Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Drake May have elected not to throw in this combine or do workouts. So we'll have limited data from them out of this. But the good news is guys like J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Spencer Rattler, and others will throw. And those are probably the prospects that Seattle would be in play for anyway. So it's still going to be a good group to watch.
There's no reason for those top three to do anything. Like they're here, they'll get their medicals, they'll go through their interviews, but none of them are getting out of the top 5 in the draft. Why would you, they don't have anything to gain and only things to lose.
The only thing that I would say about that is, you show that you're not afraid. You're not afraid of anything. You should go up and throw. That's what you do. That's who you are. That's who you've been for 4 or 5 years. You throw the ball. That's what you're the best at. And to go and not go at where you're competing head to head against your peers. Yeah, I get it. I do, Keith. I get your argument. I totally do understand. But to me, I would love to see those guys throw because of a competitive standpoint.
The thing is that they aren't the ones making that decision. Their agents are making that decision. Their agents aren't the ones that are like, it's not. It doesn't say anything about their fight or their competitiveness that their agents say, yeah, you're not doing this.
Okay. Of those that will throw, that will work out for teams, who do you believe has the best chance to have the most impact at the combine?
So there's 2 guys that I look at and I go, I really want to see them actually do something at quarterback. And that's going to be McCarthy and Nix. Both of which are guys that their tape is really good in spots. And, with Nix, does he have the arm strength to get the ball downfield regularly? And with McCarthy, there's this, what's his consistency like? Does he have the strength to get the ball down the field? Because he just didn't throw the ball that much. I don't have any problems with Penix. Penix is going in there to have his knees checked out and do interviews. But the other two guys can actually, they can quiet some of the noise by just having a good day throwing the ball. And both of which have good tape. Nick set an NCAA record for completion percentage, so clearly he's accurate. McCarthy won a national championship. I think he lost one game his entire time in Michigan, 3 years. And yeah, I mean, you're looking at guys that there's a lot to like, and I think they're going to go there. They're not shying away from anything. They're like, we're going to come up, we're going to step up, we're going to show these teams that we're ready to move on to the next level and be good there. And so those are the two guys that I'm looking forward to seeing, and that I think the Seahawks are looking forward to seeing.
There's probably one more name that I would add to that, and that would be Spencer Rattler. Consistently been kind of in a third round grade area of the draft so far. I think that this would be his opportunity to maybe rise up, maybe a half a round. I don't see him getting into the second round, but I think he could improve his stock a little bit by the interview process, by the way that he conducts himself on the field, by the way that he's consistent with his throws, and just the way that he tests overall. I think he's just got a little bit of an opportunity, a little bit of a window to maybe solidify that spot just a little bit. But most of these spots for this particular group are almost set. I mean, really, you're talking about fringy J.J. McCarthy in the first round, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams have their spots pretty much figured out in the top 5 or 6 overall. Michael Penix and Bo Nix, you mentioned Bo Nix as maybe an opportunity. Bo Nix is all over the place. I see Bo Nix at, where the Seahawks are picking close in the lower teens up all the way into the mid 20s. Michael Penix the same. So
wait, with Bo Nix, I've seen him in the late 30s.
Really?
Yeah.
Right.
Because basically people are looking at Nix and Penix, and they're like, okay, these are the number 4 and number 5 quarterbacks, and once you get past Seattle at 16, there's not a lot of quarterback needy teams until you get into the second round.
Mm-hmm.
And
Fair
so,
point.
and a bunch of those teams early in the second round just took quarterbacks in the top of the first. So, yeah, I've seen those two guys drop a little. They're older. I get it. They're both older prospects, and older prospects have no history of being as good in the pros as we think they're going to be. And, with Penix, you've got his knee, and with Nix, there's questions about arm strength, but both of them are competitors, and both of them are guys that have won and just been fantastic college players. So, yeah, late round 1, early round 2, that's fine for both of them, and that's not going to change. Now, if Nix goes out there and lays a freaking egg during the throwing drills, because he didn't really impress at Senior Bowl, and if he does that again here, you could see him drop. I don't expect him to do that because I watched him play at Oregon, and the kid can flat out play. But technically it's possible.
So they're moving on to the running back group. There's a few players that I'm interested in seeing. For Seattle, we've already got a couple of guys that are pretty darn good, but Dallas is a guy that's potentially moving on. He's an unrestricted free agent. So there's a spot on the roster. I like Braylon Allen. I'm excited to see him run at that size. I think he's like 235 pounds, something like that, and runs like a 4.4 something, 40. Love to see that. Jonathan Brooks is, by all accounts, rated as the number 1 running back prospect in this draft, although there are no first rounders for me in this group. Blake Corum out of Michigan, Audric Estime from Notre Dame is another guy I would be interested in. Maybe if they would if they do expend a pick and it's going to be in the third round or fourth round, I don't necessarily mind that so much, but we have so many other needs, Keith. It seems like we should be able to pick up a running back late or
Yeah,
priority free agent,
they've
or
got
maybe even a free agent running back that's kind of a veteran guy that maybe could come in with some kick
and there's
return ability.
there's some nice free agent running back names. Now, I say names because by the time you hit free agency as a running back, your best days are well behind you. But Austin Eckler comes to mind, a
Mm-hmm.
guy that could be your third down back, be an upgrade to DJ Dallas, be your third down back, catch the ball out of the backfield, maybe run the ball occasionally, but not be expected to do much. Man, that would be kind of a nice pickup.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I I look at the running back class. It's okay. There's some guys in there. I'm interested in Bucky Irving out of Oregon. I think um, he's got some interesting qualities with his speed and stuff. But maybe Will Shipley out of Clemson. But honestly, I'm not taking a quarterback before the sixth round in this
You mean a
draft.
running back?
Sorry, yeah, I'm not taking a running back before the sixth round in this draft if I'm Seattle, because you've got the two top guys and you've got in McIntosh a third down back style person that you didn't get to see much of last year, and very well could end up being uh, a nice player for you.
Yeah, I think this is a luxury pick for Seattle at
Mm-hmm.
running back this year, and I think you skip it almost entirely. It would shock me if they draft somebody before the fifth, sixth round,
Mm-hmm.
and would not shock me at all if they just don't
Skipped it
draft
at all.
anybody and get a guy come in and because they've got two or three positions already filled. They only need really four. Wide receiver, Keith. We've talked about Tyler Lockett. Being a little older now regarding him moving on or restructuring, that's beyond the point. We've got three or four really decent wide receivers in the wide receiver room. I don't necessarily think this is going to be a priority for the team. What about you?
Not unless they decide to trade Lockett to free up some cap space. And then you need a guy, and you go out and you draft a young player to replace him. But if they don't do that, if all they do is restructure his deal, which I think is far more likely, it's not quite running back level. You don't need one, but it's down there.
So Marvin Harris, Ohio State, will not work out at the combine. Malik Neighbors, LSU, will not work out at the combine. That means Rome and Duze has an opportunity to show out at this combine. He's going to work out. Ricky Parasol has got blazing speed. That's a guy I would like to see. Polk from Washington is another guy. Brendan Rice can kind of improve upon his nice Senior Bowl outing and kind of show what he can do. There's a number of different guys. I mean, this is a pretty decent group overall.
I just look it through, and I'm like, there's no wonder that Washington's pass offense was so damn good. You got Penix, you've got three wide receivers that are all going to be, top 100, maybe top 125.
Yeah, when you had
draft
McMillan
picks.
in there. Yeah.
And I'm just like, damn, like there's just so much talent there. And then we haven't got to the offensive linemen. There's more there as well. That was a really talented offense at Washington.
Yeah. Tez Walker, North Carolina, another guy I would be really interested in seeing. Also, Xavier Worthy out of Texas had a horrible Senior Bowl, Keith, and he needs to come back and be able to catch the ball in drills. I mean, literally, he just needs to do that. I think he'll be okay. And he needs to have good interviews with teams and kind of explain what was going on at the Senior Bowl, because that was kind of weird.
Xavier Leggett out of South Carolina is a
guy. Is that the guy I was thinking about? Yeah.
Because he's a guy that he didn't have.
Yeah, that's right.
He didn't. Well, no, you were right about the other player too, Worthy. But Leggett also had an off week at the Senior Bowl.
He did. That's the guy I was thinking about when I said that.
And looks like he's gonna, got all the measurables, but man, catch the damn ball, dude. And
so tight ends
he can make things.
Tight ends
Tight end
could be
is
a group that Seattle could be very interested in at the combine here,
yeah.
especially for like a mid-round guy, you know?
Yeah, because I mean, I don't think they're in the market for a high end one. It's kind of a luxury pick, given that they have holes elsewhere, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily the biggest deal that you have. An elite tight end. Maybe if Brock Bowers drops and is sitting there for them at 16, they
Yeah.
do that
I mean,
with
you
the
got a
idea
guy
that
that can tilt the field like that, Keith. I mean, that's what the draft is all about. Drafting your guys that you're going to build your team around for years to come. I mean, that could be a guy. I mean,
do
it
you
really
build
could.
your team around a tight end?
Yeah, but the teams
Unless
do
you
that these
unless
days. I
you're
mean, look at
unless you're drafting Travis Kelce.
yeah, but
Um,
yeah, but if they think he is going to be the next Travis Kelce, you get him. I don't know. I mean, Travis Kelce is much bigger, but
that's the thing.
Jatavian Sanders, I really like. They're not going to drop Jatavian Sanders. Ben Sinnott might be a guy that they look over. Jack Westover, even from Washington, great blocker, inline blocker. That could be a consideration. Jared Wiley kind of does it all for you. Big guy, but also can block. Jakeem Bell, maybe AJ Barner, Cade Stover from Oregon State. I like. Those are some names. It wouldn't surprise me if we pick up a tight end. I look at the team, look at the roster, Keith, and it's all really going to come down to free agency because we've got a lot of holes on this roster, and I don't know, and we'd only have 7 draft picks, so you can only solve and only 3 picks in the top 100, which are really going to be your impact players, and everything else after that, you're either really lucky or you're just filling in depth. And so you're talking really only about 3 players that are going to have an immediate impact on your roster. They better come in and have most of that solved in free agency, or you're going to be reaching in the draft, which you never really want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, but that's true every year, right? You see them sign the draft hedges, guys with low guarantee money, and therefore they're cuttable if the team does get the guy they want, and that kind of stuff. You'll see them do that, but the problem is that until they start making the moves that need to be made to free up cap space, they don't really have a lot of room to work with as for free agency. So we're going to be looking at hedges and not impact players. So maybe if they figure out a way to free up an extra 10, 15 million of cap space, kind of beyond what you and I were thinking of as the minimum, then yeah, they can go get a player. But you're still looking at filling most of those holes with draft hedges and young players.
With the additional money that came in on the cap that the league announced, plus the rework of Gino's contract, we now sit at about $12 million in cap. Before that happened, we were at about -4, -5. So that little piece, and then you say you eliminate Adams, and maybe you cut Diggs, and then Brian Monet, and maybe just 1 or 2 other things, you can get up to $35-40 million, and you have a chance to have a low first year cap hit on Leonard Williams signing. Maybe you go out and you get Brooks signed, and then maybe you take a look at restructuring Disley or cutting Disley and kind of replacing that. I think they could do some things and without really completely decimating the roster.
Here's the reason why I don't look at the increase in cap, that it went up more than we were thinking, than anyone was thinking. And that's because it went up for every single team. So now every single team has an extra 12 million to spend that they weren't planning on. That just drives up prices. It doesn't change how many players you can fit under your cap. It just means the players that you're signing
those teams that were on the margins of being right there with cap space did help themselves a little bit, and teams that were still underwater by a lot are still going to be underwater. So
true, But it just, like I said, what it does is it increases the total cap space over the entire league. Same number of players, more cap space around the league. It just leads to inflation. It just drives prices up. So I don't think you can count on it on fitting in as many guys as you'd think, because prices are going to be a little higher.
So before we start to talking about defensive guys, let's talk about the offensive line, Keith. Let's talk about our own situation. Yeah, let's talk about our own situation, kind of where we sit and why some of the guys that we're going to talk about would be important to watch at the combine.
Yeah, so the Seahawks have Cross. We found out that Abe Lucas did have knee surgery. We kind of knew because he posted that picture of him in the surgical gown.
Yeah,
but it hadn't been officially released. But that,
and he did indicate, Schneider did indicate that he would be good to go for training camp.
And they think that it was successful. It's going to clean things up. He's not going to have any of the problems that hurt him, kept him off the field for most of last year. You've got a couple of guys that were rookies last year in Oluwatimi and Bradford, who Oluwatimi played in a couple of games and looked good. Or at least it looked okayish in those games. Bradford came on and looked bad at first and then looked significantly better later, but he played in 10 games and probably was good in 8 of them. That's it. That's what you've got. As far as guys here, there's no left tackle left guard on the team because Damian Lewis is a free agent. The guy that started at right tackle last year, Haynes, is also a free agent. Their starting center last year, Evan Brown, is a free agent. Their backup right tackle for most of last year is a free agent, and so that leaves you with, you got a swing tackle, a left tackle, an injured right tackle, and 2 guys coming out of their rookie year that there's still a lot of question marks about. That's it.
Yeah, and I don't know how you feel about Stone Forsythe, but I think he showed that he was not quite yet ready for prime time.
Well, and he's old enough now. He's been in the league long enough. I don't think he ever will be ready for prime time, but you're not expecting him to be ready for prime time. He's a swing tackle. He's a guy that will play, hopefully, never.
And Jake Curhan just really didn't perform and unlikely to return, I would think.
Yeah.
Unless they just bring him back on a minimum.
He just never developed into a competent pass blocker. I mean, we knew that after his rookie year, but he could run block with the best of them, and he needed to develop just a little bit as a pass blocker, and he just didn't. So
let me ask you this, Keith. There's a lot of offensive linemen here. If we were to expend a pick at 16 and it ended up being an offensive lineman, because, we need to invest in the trenches. Team has talked about that. Team has talked about starting to dominate, inside for this team. And it just hasn't happened for a long time. And we have a decent defensive teams against us in our own division. If you were to identify a player that the Seahawks should be interested in or potentially draft at 16, who would you select?
I can give you 2 names. Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon. He's a center/guard. One of the better center prospects we've seen in recent memory. And can play guard just as well. Just a guy who's going to be a dominant player. And then the other one is, it's weird. I'm talking about a lot about Pacific Northwest guys, but out of Washington, his last name, got my list and I've got to find the name again. Yeah. I think I was going to say Fawatanu. He's a tackle. He's a guy that I believe is a right tackle in the NFL, and that he's got plenty of length and stuff to do that. Other people disagree with me. They say that he's a guard. Okay, so he's a right guard, and you move Bradford over to the left side. I'm good with that. And then if something were to happen to your right tackle, if Abe Lucas isn't ready, or if his knee starts giving him problems again, well, guess what? You've got a guy that can push from guard out to tackle, and you can still keep going. both of those guys, I think, are legit first round talents even as interior offensive linemen, which there's rarely many interior offensive linemen that go in the first round, but both of those guys are legit. And I'd be very happy with either one of them.
Yeah. Wow. And I think both those guys could very well be available at 16. There's another guy I'll throw out there, Graham Barton from Duke. He's
Yep.
a guy that you could potentially move back a little bit for in the first round. And he would be there for you to kind of lock down potentially the center spot. He played tackle at Duke.
Left tackle at Duke, and now he's got to switch to a new position that he's never played because that's where his athletic profile pushes him to. Okay, I get why people are excited about him, but
That's a big ask.
I think you move back. If he's your target, you move back into the late 20s. You move back multiple times.
I agree.
Before you head down that road.
Christian Hayes, another guy that I like. Tyler Gooten out of Oklahoma is a tackle. I like, but
we haven't done our tackle show,
round.
But Talise Fuaga out of Oregon State is a guy that, man, don't sleep on him. He is.
Is he a right tackle guy, if I remember correctly?
He is. Yeah. But he's everything you'd want in a right tackle. He's got the length, he's got the footwork, he's got the power. He's better than a lot of people think. Guard that I like, since we're talking interior guys, Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State. Mm-hmm. Guy's a freaking mountain. And I think
I'm looking forward to him working out.
Yeah, he's the guy that I'm really looking forward to seeing here, because I expect him to look extremely powerful, and I'm interested in if he has any agility whatsoever.
So he's a guy, Keith. Now you're talking about roster building and draft strategy here. He's a guy that I see mocked and big boarded at around 50 in most mocks, which would put him squarely into the second round. How does Seattle maneuver in order to be able to have access to a few of these names, like BB and Graham Barton and Tyler Gooten, if they should do that, or Christian Hayes even?
Well, I mean, you're looking at, if you're doing that, you're probably not sitting at 16. You're moving down to, let's say, 20, and picking up another pick and maybe packaging a couple of thirds to get up into the 50s. And then you have the third that you got for moving down in the first round. So that gives you a first, a second, and a third instead of a first and 2/3. And that's kind of the type of thing that you're going to have to do in order to just pick up the draft capital in the range that makes sense for some of these guys. Because if they're going in the 50s, they've either got to drop a whole round more than people think and get down into the 70s, or you're not going to get them. And you're not taking them at 16. Right? So what else are you going to do? Like if that's a target, if that's a guy like, we really like this guy, we think he's going to be great. Okay, make the moves, figure out what you got to do to go get him. It's not easy. It really isn't. So
as we switch over to the defensive side of the ball, and we've taken up quite a bit of the time on this show, but let's run through these. If there was a player in the first round, defensive player, who would you identify? And I'm specifically kind of looking at the defensive line, Keith, as far as if you were to expend a pick at 16, is there somebody sitting there that you just couldn't pass on?
Oh man. There's a couple. Byron Murphy out of Texas comes to mind. Guys just straight up, I don't think he'd be there at 16.
Really?
Yeah.
I
don't think he's not going to be that early. He's going to be like 13 in there, but he's a guy that, man, he'd be, especially if they don't re-sign Leonard Williams, because he's a guy that comes in that kind of has that Leonard Williams profile. And so that's kind of where I would see him. If they don't re-sign Leonard Williams, they're probably going to have Jerron Reed at that 3-tech spot. And so, okay. And then you can have a guy like Byron Murphy, in there and allows you to use Jerron Reed as both a 3 and a 1 but you need a 1 still.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, at 16, I mean, he's kind of the guy that I initially look at and think, okay, he's someone that we can look at. People will say Tavondre Sweat out of Texas. His the other Texas one, because he's like 340 or 360 depending on who you ask. I don't think he's at 16. You want to take him at 28, sure, because he's big, but there's a lot of risk there because his weight tends to get up way too high, and then and anytime you start getting guys with weights up there, their knees don't last, and the fact that
I'd even wait a little longer. I mean, if Seattle's going to trade back 1, 2, 3 times and drop out of the first round, and he's sitting there in the top end of the second round, that'd be a guy that I would look at for that spot.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you on that. There's a couple of players that have met with the Seahawks so far, just today, in fact. Defensive end Marshawn Nealon out of Western Michigan has met with the Seahawks. Jimmy Newton, defensive tackle out of Illinois, has met with the Seahawks. That one's intriguing to me because that's the player that would be a player that would be in play at 16 to 25. And
you think that high?
Yeah, I do actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that
we haven't done our defensive tackle show, so that we haven't.
He's probably my second choice at defensive tackle. Byron Murphy, I think, is the guy that I would be targeting at that spot at 6'4", 309. Byron Murphy is just everything you want in a defensive tackle. And then a guy like Rook Oroboro out of Clemson is on Bruce Feldman's freak list. I'd be interested in taking a look at him. I'm out of the first round now with guys. Chris Jenkins out of Michigan, I'm interested in only because he was there when McDonald was there. McKinley Jackson is another big defensive tackle out of Texas A&M. You're going to hear us talk about defensive tackles because for me, I think we need one. We need a guy that's over 320 pounds on this roster.
Everyone thinks they need one. I mean, they do. I mean, you can't honestly look at this roster and not think that they need a defensive tackle. Look at how bad the offense or the defensive line's been the last 2 years.
A few other players that I'm interested in seeing at the combine is Brandon Dolores from Oregon, Brandon Fisk from Florida State. I want to see him work out. Latu out of UCLA. If he's going to work out, that'd be a great player to watch. Chop Robinson, I think, has got something to prove in this combine a little bit. I think he's going to work out and really show. A guy that can really move, and it's got one of the best first steps I've ever seen out of a defensive end. Darius Robinson out of Missouri is another guy. Braylon Trice from Washington's a good edge-setting kind of a defensive end that I think locally is going to appeal.
He's
Jared
like a
Verse, same sort of thing.
He's a 5 tech. I really like him if the team looks at what they got from Jones last year and is like, yeah, we overpaid him and let's move on and recoup some of that cap space. I don't think they're going to do that, but if they do, oh man, that would be a nice replacement, low cost.
Linebackers. So really, I kind of want to focus on inside linebackers because we've got Jordan Brooks is unrestricted. I think it's unlikely Bobby Wagner's going to come back, even at a discount number. I think the team just moves on. New coaching staff, not attached to Bobby. And they need some more speed and more athleticism at that spot. I'd be looking at Junior Colson out of Michigan, freshman when McDonald coached there. So he's got some very good knowledge about that. Mm-hmm. Tommy Eichenberg out of Ohio State, mid-round kind of prospect. Jalen Ford, Texas, similar player.
Not a great draft class for
I think
off
it's
the
okay.
ball middle linebacker groups.
I mean, you got to get somebody before the end of third round. I'm not saying that these players are going to be available later. I'm saying if you want one, you got to go get one. Cedric Gray, North Carolina, I think is a good prospect. Dallas Turner, Met with the Seahawks. He's more of an edge player at 245 pounds. Trevon Wallace met with the Seahawks. He's on Bruce Feldman's list, 6'2", 241. That's a guy that they would look at, later round guy. Nathaniel Watson, Mississippi State.
Tyron Hopper out of, I think that's Iowa. 221 pounds, so small, but
yeah, you don't want those guys though. I don't think they don't have a position on the defense.
I don't know. He's small, but man, that guy's got some great speed, good in coverage. Yeah, I mean, this is what I mean. Like, there are guys, but do they really fit a 3-4 middle linebacker?
Yeah, most of the guys I've been talking about are like 340, 339, 340. I mean, last year's class, Keith, was really undersized. This year's class, they have a lot more, inside linebacker types that are more prototypical. And the biggest name I think is Junior Colson out of Michigan. I think that's a guy. If McDonald is looking for a quarterback of his defense, and it's not going to be a safety, then it's going to be a middle linebacker. That would be a guy that I would watch. Now, if Seattle drops back and picks up additional picks, that guy's going to be probably going in the top end of the second round. And I would be curious as to if they did acquire a pick into that range, and I'm talking anywhere from 35 to 50. If he's sitting there, that might be a guy that they would look at, because they will need middle linebacker help out of this draft. I just don't know when it's going to come.
Peyton Wilson's another guy to look at. He's going to be, and then Javon Solomon. I know he's kind of looked at maybe as an edge / linebacker. Really, he is a guy that can do a lot of different things. I think he'd be a good inside linebacker that you can blitz or move him around a little bit and let him come off the edge at other times. And there's some. Then after that, it's like just too many guys that are just too small.
Yeah. So defensive backs. Now, for me, I'm not going to be looking too hard at the cornerback position. We've got a pretty decent room of cornerbacks. They're always going to add depth and so forth. I think our top three are already on the roster. So you're looking at the fourth, fifth guy, even if. And so I'm more interested in the safeties out of this class. I just don't know how high they go and draft a guy. But safeties are really important in a Mike McDonald defense. We've seen that in the past. Those players have been really nice and athletic and well paid, and they like their free safeties to be able to really play deep and cover sideline to sideline. And if Diggs is not there for contract reasons, they're going to have to fill that spot. And I see a draft hedge, anyway. I see a draft hedge in free agency, but in the draft, I think you could get a guy like Cameron Kitchens, for example, or Jaden Hicks out of Washington State. If you're going to do a later round guy, Malik Mustafa out of Wake Forest, potentially. Javon Bullard out of Georgia, or Kalen Bullock out of USC, I think are options. But it really depends on where you spend that draft capital. I would hate to see them spend a high pick on Cameron Kitchens, like a, late back end of the first round or second round pick, but he's perfect as far as like a single high free safety guy type.
But the thing is, if you go look at what McDonald likes to do, like, he doesn't play a lot of single high free safety. He will go, cover 2 and have 2 teams back. He'll go cover 6, which is a cover 3 on one side and a cover 2 on the other. But
he does like to play multiple. I mean, he will play a free single high, but if you don't have one on your roster, obviously not.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying that it's not as big of a deal as it is in a Pete Carroll defense. And so I could see them being okay with that. You just said, like, if Diggs isn't there because of contract, what about him not being there because of, quality of play reasons?
I'm I hear what you're saying. I'm torn a little bit because I didn't really care for Diggs' play last year. I didn't really care for his attitude. I saw some things on the field I didn't like. And then you talk about the contract. So for me, there's 3 strikes. I don't know how the new regime is going to view him. If they need somebody with veteran experience. A, B,
He's had
was
half a
his
good
play
season in 2
detrimental?
years.
Was his play dictated by scheme? Like, did the scheme just not suit him? We saw that multiple times with multiple players not being put in a position to be successful, and maybe they were asking him to cover in ways that just didn't suit him. I don't know, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't know that he dropped off so much.
He's
At
had
times he played well.
he's had half a good season in the last 2 years combined. I'm just
He's very inconsistent to me.
I would and at 18 million, you got to let him walk. And you got to replace him, and I think they replace him probably in free agency because you can let him walk and bring in a guy of the Julian Love caliber.
Yeah, you pay somebody $5-6 million, $7 million. I think you can get pretty decent play.
I'd love to see them draft Malik Mustafa out of Wake Forest. He'll probably go in the 4th round,
maybe later.
But he's got. I mean, he's only 5'9". He's a little on the short side, but 4.33 speed. The guy can
he's
freaking
got sideline
run.
to sideline stuff.
He is athletically similar to Earl Thomas. Now,
people are going to get excited about this kid at the combine,
can he play the way Earl Thomas did? I don't know, but he's got athletic profile wise. He is going to get people excited.
Fun. And then, we got the specialists, but that's it. We don't need to talk about those guys. So, for me, you're taking a look at
snappers.
For me, I think, you're taking a look at a guy like, Spencer Rattler, quarterback, to kind of show out and help himself in this combine. A guy like Isaac Garendo out of Louisville, running back, that could help himself out. 6'1", 220 pounds. I like his profile. Offensive tackle Tyler Grable. I don't know. You probably don't even know about him at all, but I think he's a guy that could run a sub 50 40 at 300 plus pounds and kind of be talked about as a really athletic guy that can move out in space. Might rise up a little bit. Trayvon Wallace is another guy, the linebacker out of Kentucky. I think that he's a prospect I think Seattle's going to be interested in, and he could be a middle round kind of guy. So, I mean, those are some guys. Tez Walker, wide receiver out of North Carolina, I think is going to do well. Bo Nix, I think Bo Nix could really help himself, Keith, in this combine, both in interviews. I think he's going to interview well, really well, and very competent guy. I think teams are going to view him as a day one NFL backup with the potential to start and be really good in years 2, 3, 4. Potentially, I don't know if you want to press Bo Nix into starting for your team in 2024, but I think he could be totally ready to go in 2025.
Okay. My problem with that is he's not going to get his first NFL start till he's how old?
Yeah, but you still could potentially get 2 contracts out of him. I mean, you got your 4-year contract, and then you could have another, 3-4 year contract after that. What else could you ask for out of a prospect in the NFL anyway? I mean, you're really only getting guys until they're 33, 34 years old, and then that's it. So you get 8 to 10 years out of a guy. I don't know that that's necessarily a thing that's going to keep me from drafting Bo Nix. And you factor in the fact that he improved every year, and he stayed in school because he transferred, and the NIL money and COVID. And I think more prospects stayed in school more than most years. So I'm not going to hold that completely against him. I think that maybe there's some exceptions to that rule this year as far as older quarterback prospects making it or not making it in the NFL. I think Bo Nix and Michael Penix are two examples.
Yeah. I don't know. I just got a long history of older players busting and a non-existent history of older players succeeding. So it's real hard.
That's
It's real
true.
hard to look at that and think that's gonna work for them. But the thing is, I really like both guys. But man, the idea that you're gonna draft and sit an old player so he's not gonna get his first start until he's 26 or 27.
I think
Like,
that the Bo Nixes and the Michael Penix guys, they're going to be drafted in spots in the draft where potentially teams with decent records that don't necessarily need to start them right away are going to be drafting them. And for better or for worse, that is what it is.
yeah. Okay.
That's all I got.
Yeah. No, I think we've thrown out so many names here. If anyone's still listening, thank you. Thank you for sticking with us. There's a lot of names. And if you're not really into the draft, that was probably an interesting listen for you. But overall, like, there's a lot. These are fun. These are fun days. Like, just go enjoy, some football and things being interesting.
Here's what I'm counting on. Anybody that's listening to our show in the off season between the end of the game in January and the NFL draft knows that we're going to be talking about this stuff. And this is kind of what we do. We've been doing this for 8 years now. And so if you're still sticking with this, you know what you're getting into. Okay, so we'll come back after the combine this weekend and talk about what we saw. Any surprises? Any weird things? Any good things? Any must-have players that, oh my gosh, we just have to have this guy on the Seahawks team? We'll talk about all that, and then we'll get right back into doing some more prospects as we get to the tackles, and then right soon, like within 2 weeks after the combine, free agency starts. So we got a lot to talk about. Find Keith
busy couple of weeks.
Yeah, find Keith on Twitter at Mars NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. You know where the show's at. Hit that subscribe button, share it, leave a review, comment, all that good stuff. That would be great. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.